Hello, my name is JoAn Canning. I'm the Superintendent of Schools here in the Addison Northwest Supervisory Union, and I am joined this morning by Tracey Newton, who is a member of our Act 46 Study Committee, a parent of two children, one in second grade and the other entering kindergarten soon, from the town of Ferrisburg. Also joining us this morning is Steve Dale, a former Vermont School Boards Association Executive Director, who is serving as a consultant for our Act 46 Study Committee. Welcome to both of you this morning.
Thanks.
So I thought I would begin by introducing and also asking some questions of our participants this morning in hopes that we can continue to educate the community concerning Act 46 and the goals that we have set out here in the Addison Northwest Supervisory Union over the past couple of months as well as in the next month going forward. So Steve, let's start with you. Can you tell our viewers a brief overview of Act 46? And what are the goals and the implementation options that we are studying?
Okay. Act 46 was passed by the legislature this past session in response to two primary realities in Vermont. The first is that Vermont has seen a 20% increase in its student population over the past 16 years. It's very sobering for me. My youngest son graduated in 1999, and I believe that since that time, our school has seen a continued decline in enrollment for that entire period. Expenditures on education during this time, and again, we're talking now on a statewide basis, have not fallen largely because we've not been able to adjust staffing levels proportionately in our school districts. If you have a school of 100 students and you lose 20 of those students, it is very difficult to eliminate 20% of the staff in that school. And that has been multiplied over and over in Vermont. We have by far the smallest student-teacher ratio in the country, and we have been proud of our small classrooms and our small ratios. However, there is a limit, and in terms of costs, it's an extraordinarily expensive way to educate. The net result has been rapidly rising cost per student in many of our districts, and we now are either the highest spending state in the country or one of the top three. Cost per student in Vermont, because of our funding mechanism, is a major driver of property tax rates. And as we all know, in the last several years, there have been a number of budgets that have been defeated, but even more importantly, there's been a lot of angst in the legislature about property tax rates and school budgets and why they continue to rise. They've been rising in a modest manner, but they've been rising nonetheless at a time with this significant shrinking enrollment. So that was the first major driver, the first major source of the energy behind Act 46. The second, and it's partly related to these economic stresses and the cost per student, has been growing disparity in educational opportunities afforded students across different districts. And we have districts that may be spending a fairly equal amount of money with their neighbors. So let's say two districts are both spending $18,000 per student, but in one of those districts you may be getting a really what would be considered a world-class education, and in other situations you may be getting something that's substandard. And the reason for that is that in a school with declining enrollment, you may find that your cost per student is rising rapidly, your taxpayers are putting pressure on the school board, school boards are cutting offerings as the means of trying to keep that number down. And another school district that may not be losing students so quickly can be spending that amount of money and actually buying significant quality and opportunity. So the disparity across Vermont has been significant. Now again, these are statewide trends, and the reality in each community is quite different. So that's why it's important that every region and every community actually do the research themselves. The general strategy that the legislature chose to try to address this dynamic was to move toward larger school districts. And I use that term loosely because in Vermont, the kind of school district size they're talking about is not big by national standards. but I would call them somewhat larger districts. So as you are probably aware, there's a suggestion that if districts act quickly, if they have 900 students in the new district, that would be an acceptable size. That is a very small size when you look at national standards. Most school boards oversee districts that are substantially larger than that. There were several components in the bill in terms of the approach to achieving those somewhat larger districts. The law encourages school boards and citizens in all areas of the state to take seriously this challenge and to try to address issues of equity, quality, and cost, and to create what the law calls preferred governance structures on their own terms. So there's a strong push for people such as your district to figure this out on their own terms. I will tell you that people who work in state government or in the State Board of Education, the last thing they want to do is to be getting into decision-making with local communities. So this law basically says, please, look, folks locally, figure this out and move toward a somewhat larger district. Secondly, the law provides substantial incentives for prompt action. And there are clear disincentives for not acting. And so part of what each region has to do is model both the impact of the incentives, the benefit of the incentives, as well as the cost of not acting. A district such or a supervisory union such as the Addison Northwest Supervisory Union is really ideally suited for action under what are known as the accelerated incentives. Thirdly, districts that don't undergo significant structural change on their own can propose an alternative plan to the Secretary of Education by the fall of 2017. There are many very complex situations across Vermont where people will need to really use very creative ideas and mix and match different kinds of districts, and may still need a supervisory union structure. Many of those places, some of those places will likely come up with what is known as an alternative plan. In Addison Northwest, again, it's a fairly simple structure with a long-standing union high school, with a union elementary school. This is not a complex situation, but there is the choice that a community such as this one could say, we'll take our chances. We're going to go to the state board and propose to keep our supervisory union structure. Those proposals need to go to the secretary in November of 2017. And by June of 2018, the secretary puts together a proposal for how to move to larger school districts across the state, which can be imposed as of July 1st, 2019. If communities move forward on their own terms, they are exempt from this state action. If they don't move forward, and if they submit sort of this alternative plan idea to the secretary, they do subject themselves to a decision by the State Board of Education on the future structure of their education system. So the Addison Northwest Supervisory Union has set up a committee, and there's a whole legal structure in Vermont statute to analyze, and this is the language that they use, to analyze the advisability of moving quickly toward a unified union district in a way that provides for a stronger education system over the long run, and will do so on a timeline that will provide the opportunities for maximum financial incentives for taxpayers. Actually, I paraphrased that, but that's the essence of why a study committee was created, and we, the three of us, are involved in the work of that committee. One very important consideration of all the towns of this supervisory union is to anticipate what might happen in 2018 and 2019 if the communities do not take action on their own. And there has been and will continue to be further discussion and analysis of that by this committee. This is strictly a personal opinion based on, it's an informed personal opinion, but it is difficult for me to imagine a circumstance under which if there is not action taken on the terms of these communities, it would be likely that the state board would simply say the Virgins Union High School District needs to become a single school district. And my advice to your committee is to take that possibility seriously and to figure out a path ahead that would serve your students and your taxpayers.
So I do think this committee and our boards are taking this subject seriously, Steve. As you noted in the state, we're seeing declining in student enrollment. We are seeing that same decline in the Addison Northwest Supervisory Union member districts. This year, for the first time, we went under 1,000 students, and it is my prediction that over the next 5 years, we will continue to see some level of decline. So it was the wisdom of the collective boards back in August to vote unanimously to form once again an Act 46 study committee, because we've studied unification before, so that we can take advantage of the offered incentives, as well as take advantage of, as we see it, a plan to use our staff more efficiently and continue to centralize services and supports when it appears that would be in the best interest of all of our districts. So Tracey, from your perspective, what are some of the benefits that taxpayers and students might see from a unification?
So, as Steve talked about, the benefits for the taxpayers would be taking advantage of the incentives. Mm-hmm. So, they're talking about a reduced tax rate for school boards that move ahead with this. So there's a benefit for our taxpayers going ahead with this. Additionally, there's the benefit of the fact that when we pool our resources, we can spend the money more efficiently. Mm-hmm. And rather than each individual school needing to look at each individual program and say, can we afford this for this one school? We can say, well, if we can't afford it in each school, maybe we can afford it with one school and have all the students take advantage of it. Mm. So one subject actually that came up during one of the committee meetings was, for example, there was a fund for Odyssey of the Mind. Mm. Well, there's not enough kids in one school to do Odyssey of the Mind, but there's enough kids across 3 schools that might be interested. Mm-hmm. So by pooling our resources, not just the money, but also the number of kids, we actually might be able to look at expanding our programs or at least using our resources more efficiently.
That's great. Some other examples that I might share is that in some schools our students have access to instrumental as well as chorus, and in other schools we don't. There is one school who has a one-to-one device program available and other schools do not. We have differences in the way in which we provide library media services and nursing services. So from my perspective, I see an opportunity to address the inequities of student learning opportunities across the district. And those are just some brief examples. You mentioned before, someone mentioned before staffing. In our supervisory union currently, we have inequities in terms of our classrooms. In one school, we could have 10 students in a classroom, and in another, we would have 22. So it allows us to align our staff to address more consistency in our staffing across the supervisory union and use people and their talents in the best way possible. So Tracey, what do you think will be our challenges to get the support of the community to support the work of Act 46 Study Committee?
I think there's currently a lot of fear. First of all, there's fear of change. Mm-hmm. Everyone loves their school, and the school is often the center of the community. And there's a lot of fear that someone else is going to come in and take control. Mm-hmm. And then the feel of the school is going to change, and it's going to become a big box store chain rather than our individual local school. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants that kind of change. So there's a lot of fear out there, and if we can address that fear, I think the community will support it. There's also a lot of fear of the unknown. People say, well, I don't know what the final structure is going to look like, but I do know what the current structure looks like. So I want to stay with what I know rather than this unknown nebulous form. So if we can come out with a pretty solid finalized structure that we can present to the community, I think people will feel more comfortable if they can know where we're going.
Right. I know from working with each of the boards that they recognize and celebrate the different cultures of our schools. So I don't think anyone on this study committee nor on the school board wants to change that, because that reflects the value of that community. And so it's going to be really important for us to get out there that this is not about changing culture or not trying to align to what's important in the communities, but rather using our resources more efficiently so that the students can really benefit from this.
JoAn, I think in terms of gaining the support of the community, part of it is to make sure that we are collectively effective at making sure community members understand the context, understand the environment that we're in as a state, understand what the real choices are. This is not a choice between, well, let's come together and unify, or let's sort of do nothing. The fact is, there is a complex environment that's been created by the legislature, which involves the incentives, the disincentives, and the eventuality of state board having the authority to act. So I just think I know in my life, I can only pay attention to so many things, and there are many public issues that are going on all around me in my town and in the state that I don't really engage with until election day or until it's in my face. Our hope by this program and by other opportunities that you will be provided, that people will find themselves fully engaging in the discussion so that they can be informed about the true choices and the benefits to both students and to taxpayers.
Great, thank you. So Steve, based on your work with this committee, what do you think the challenges and obstacles will be going forward? I mean, the challenges and the strengths, I'm sorry.
Well, let me start with the strengths. I've really enjoyed the time that I've spent with this committee. People are obviously first and foremost committed to students. There's substantial concern about being responsive to taxpayer concerns and the cost of education and efficiency and cost per student. But first and foremost, people are concerned about quality over the long run, and they're concerned about the sustainability of quality. If you only look at this issue from what's happening today and acting to either combine districts or not, it's quite short-sighted because we are this has been a long trend. I mean, it's been 20 years of declining enrollment, and if it continues for another 5 or 10, and if the legislature continues to be distressed and there continues to be action, it's important for local groups to come together and say, how are we going to get ahead of this curve? How are we going to create enough scale to make sure we can withstand these trends? And what I have been totally impressed with this group is that they're very committed to students, to the long-term quality of education. They're committed to all the students in the region. You have a long history. I mean, you know, folks who are concerned about attention to their local communities, you have a long history, like a 50 or 60-year history of running a union high school where the people on that board are concerned about every student. They're not only concerned about the percentage of the students from their particular town, they're concerned about all the students at Virginia's Union High School. Any new board has to be, and I'm confident from what I've seen, will be committed to all students. They're very responsive. The group is very responsive to taxpayers. These boards are clear that they have an obligation to provide the best deal they can. There have been a lot of concerns about making sure that at the end of the day that there is attention paid to the cost issues. So this isn't simply about continuing to provide students the very best, but also understanding that it's a difficult economic time for our state on all kinds of fronts. And I think it's important to mention that this committee has been very concerned that each school board take care of property-related issues that have been longstanding in each of our communities. The work of this committee is about moving forward with a unified district, but there's also an understanding that once you create a unified district under a larger board, that if there are some kind of property ownership issues in a particular community, and I won't go through and name all of them, but it's important that those issues get resolved by the current board and the current select board or city council, so that those aren't sort of ongoing issues that people have to take care of. And so this committee has been very concerned that make sure those issues get dealt with, not by the committee, but by the local boards. The biggest challenges, I said it a couple of minutes ago, I think the biggest challenge is to help members of the electorate understand the long-term educational and financial benefits, and to help our communities understand how important it is to make a change on their terms, not on the state's terms. I don't think the state wants to do it, and they will, you know, in my own experience, they probably won't do it well. And I think people such as those on this committee are informed. They care deeply about their communities, about the long-term role of the school in each of their towns, and they'll make sure that there's a structure put in place around this unification that is that's going to work for the communities involved.
So Tracey, how would you, or in what ways should community members receive information about Act 46? What have we done to get the word out?
Well, I know that we've got everything out on the Addison Northwest website.
That's correct.
And there's been a lot of information being sent out in the newsletters in the local elementary schools. We've also had postings up, across the towns, notifying about community forums and things like that. And I've seen it on Front Page Forum. There was something in the Addison Independent. So I think we're trying to hit every piece of media, and of course, with things like this as well.
That is true. We have a Facebook page, and you can access that by clicking on to Addison Northwest Supervisory Union Facebook. But all of those, we've tried to blanket the media.
I don't think there's any Twitter, but I don't really think
Actually, we do have a Twitter
do?
account.
Okay,
we
then
do.
I was wrong.
We do, and I've been tweeting a little bit about this.
Okay.
So we had one forum at Virginia's Union High School not too long ago, and we're planning 2 more community forums. Steve, can you speak a little bit about how those community forums are structured and where they will be?
Okay, there are 2 purposes of the community forums. Number 1 is to make sure that we are continuing to inform the community about Act 46, about what it entails, about the incentives, about the eventualities, et cetera. So that's number 1. And number 2, they are opportunities for the public to speak with the committee about what they're concerned about. And so the first meeting was held in Virgins, I think it was October 28th. The second one is next Tuesday?
It
A
is
week from
December
today?
1st.
Yes, December, that's right.
December 1st.
December 1st at 6 o'clock at the Addison School.
Correct.
And the third meeting will be December 14th at Ferrisburg at the same time, 6 o'clock. The format will basically be the same. However, obviously, during this period of time, the committee has continued to do its work. So the first meeting was very much here's what the law says, these are the things we're thinking about, what do you think? The second meeting will be, here's what the law says, this is what we're thinking about, and here's the analysis that we've done to date. So there's more work that's been done on how those themes that I mentioned earlier relate to this particular district. And then on the 14th of December, hopefully there will be actually a draft of the articles. We can talk much more specifically about what the committee is thinking about relative to the specific arrangements. So we would urge people to come to all 3 meetings to both stay informed and to continue to contribute to the dialogue. There were some very important issues that got raised at the first meeting from the public, and we look forward to talking with a number of folks.
Great. So Tracey, what are you hearing from community members about Act 46? Are you hearing anything at all?
I am, actually. I have heard from a couple of people some people are very concerned that the entire purpose of Act 46 is to close schools. And that is what we're doing. We're studying how to close schools. And I hasten to say, no, that's not what we're doing at all. We're not closing any schools. We're not looking at that. This is not what we're behind. So it was good to be able to reassure them. But mostly people are just concerned that their property taxes seem to keep going up, and they don't necessarily see a corresponding bump in the education. So what are we doing to hopefully look at that? So really, it's a concern from both the educational standard and the property taxes.
So it'll be really important for us to, when we complete this report, to show both from the taxpayers' perspective as well as from the equity, student, and staff issue how this could be beneficial for our district. Steve, are you aware of other school districts that are studying unification, and how might that study look different than ours?
There are many school districts. Ultimately, all regions of the state have to deal with this issue, with a few rare exceptions. Some of the larger cities may not have to engage as specifically, but most towns in the state have to do this. As you know, here in this area, you have a number of your neighbors that are or have looked at this issue. Mount Mansfield, which is not too far away, recently took action to unify most of their towns. Chittenden Central, which is Essex and Essex Junction, recently voted on election day to create a single, and Westford to create a single district. Most close to home, Addison Central is heavily involved in this same conversation, and I believe they will be asking their voters to consider an article on town meeting day. Chittenden South, Washington West, many towns around us are involved in these same kinds of considerations.
Good. So what is the last concluding message that we'd like to give to the public before we close this show today? Tracey?
I think there's a lot of strengths that can be found through consolidation. I think every town has this idea of we should be able to go it alone, but we're getting smaller, and we don't have enough kids, and we're going to get to the point where we won't have critical mass, and you need a certain number of kids to get the resources to have a quality education. And if we consolidate, we can get a lot of strengths out of that and stabilize and get more consistency.
Great. Steve?
I think it's important to remember that on the scale of largeness, Vermont is by far the smallest in the United States, by far.
By far.
In my old job, I used to talk about the fact that Vermont has one school board member for every 55 students. The next closest is Maine, that has one for every 135 students, and then it goes up from there. We are very, very tiny, which has served us extremely well over a long period of time. We don't want to go big. We don't want to be big. We should fight being big. I mean, there are people who say we should have 15 school districts in the state. I would be adamantly opposed to that. That's not what this conversation is about. It's becoming slightly larger so that there's enough scale to be able to provide high-quality education at a price that people will continue to support. And because this district this SU has such a long history of working together, they're really ideally suited to take full advantage of the incentives and to do some great things for both students and taxpayers.
That's great. So I'd like to, in conclusion, I'd like to thank those of you who took the time to listen to our show today, and I'd like to encourage you, should you have any further questions, please come to our community forums, or you may contact the superintendent's office at anwsu.org. Thank you.